Welcome to the Uncommon CEO podcast, where we unpack the mindset, skills, and wisdom it takes to become an uncommon leader in a common world. With your host, the Uncommon CEO himself, Andrew Smart.
Andrew, good to have you back for the Uncommon CEO podcast again. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Matt. Like I said, I shared with you before. I'm proud to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. After going through a little health scare, you probably hopefully have heard about from our last episode. We're keeping chugging along.
That sharing the story of obviously different medical experience we've had and coming through challenges, when I consider often the greatest challenges when you're facing a life or death scenario, whether it's physically, business, and then who you are coming out of it. I ended that podcast talking about being grateful. And that gratitude. I think that too often in life, we go through life not being grateful enough. And gratitude was one of my words for the year. And, and sometimes it takes a tough event for us to experience to level set our mentality of gratitude.
You forget how lucky you are until you are needing to be surrounded by those who love you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, and it's not always about those who love you. It's recognizing that the people you need in your life. I mean, in that story I shared, it was being surrounded by people who love you, but I needed the experts around me too.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so, being grateful that you have a whole host of things in your life that we don't always see or acknowledge. Maybe a better word. So no, I'm grateful to be here. I'm excited. Kind of want to share with you some thoughts that I've had. Talk to them about how it applies to life, business, kind of how I've been challenging our organization. So, in my time, kind of off, what I like to say, it was kind of what I consider forced time off. Sometimes people wired the way I do have to be forced sometimes to take that time off. We're not always good at, and I know through my wife's journey, not always being good to be like, okay, I just need to kind of shut it down, get away. When I was in my early years of building business, the franchise company, the restaurants, things like that, I'd go on vacations, but I could never really be on vacation.
It's hard to settle.
Yeah, I couldn't. And I felt like so much of it relied on me. Well, when you're physically knocked out, you're thrown into a state where, well, there's not a lot I can do at this point. So I guess I got to trust people. And right. So it was really good. It was really good because I got the opportunity to read some books, do some of the things I like doing when I can get away. And it brought me back to, some things that I'm thinking about. Where am I at? What am I doing? What am I, my word for this year is disciplined. I've done some really good discipline things. I'm not where I want to be overall in discipline. Got knocked off a little bit with being this medical deal and got to level set and reset some areas. But I had that time to do some reflection. I also had the time to spend, recently with some people, friends and colleagues and people in our organization at a event that I always like to attend every year. You were there. Is the All-In Ball that's for the S1E21 Foundation, and had the blessing of being able to spend a great time, but also share with people some behind the scenes of an organization I'm proud to be a part of, a university and a culture that I'm proud to be a part of, and obviously a football program I'm proud to be a part of. And to see what they do, to see what standards they have, to kind of get outside of our normal box, to see how does this thing operate, why does it operate that way, and what are the results of that overall mental culture there. So I really want to talk through that. I want to talk about, some of the things that we experienced there, but I want to talk about what I took away from all that time and that time away and that time that we had. And I wrote here, in my notes that at the very top, I wrote the word inspect.
Mm-hmm.
So What does the word inspect mean to you?
Well, to look closely at something against an expectation, because no matter what, you have some sort of expectation of what's going to be there when you inspect or look a little closer. You may be comparing it to a standard. You may be just comparing it to a preconception of what you think is going to be there. But it's essentially scrutinizing detail to compare it to something else.
Yeah. If you go to buy a home, anyone who has to buy a home, part of the home process of purchase is it requires an inspection.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just part of the process, which you've had before, I've had before.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you get this inspection. Now, have you ever bought a house that's, you've had an inspection, but once you've had the inspection, signed the box there, you get to your house, have you ever had some things that were missed?
You will like my entire current house. We bought it on a short sale, so like we can inspect it, but you're getting what you're getting here, buddy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I every time I've had that deal on inspection, I'm like, they didn't really inspect everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They notated a few things, went through here, but they didn't really inspect anything. And I think that's a common theme of inspections. I think in that environment, inspection is a check the box, do little things. Sometimes they'll catch a few things, maybe some of the major things, but there's a lot of things that you don't do in inspection.
Sure.
And so I wrote on the top here, expect what you inspect.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have that word expect, so if you only inspect to a bare minimum level, what should your expectations be?
It should be low. I mean, if you are going to go on a road trip and the only thing you check is your gas level and you end up with a flat tire, what did you expect?
You didn't evaluate it before you left.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't see it. I mean, some cars, obviously today, we get a little lazy because we got all these sensors that tell us. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I grew up where you actually had to use a gauge to make sure
you had to pull that oil out.
Yeah, you can get the entire gauges. Mm-hmm. You know, most people don't know how to use one these days. And so, but no, I mean, it's expect what you inspect. And so thinking about that, here's a statement. Truth is confirmed by inspection and delay. So when we talk about truth is confirmed, we inspect, and the delay process is that processing, you know, evaluating what we expect. Falsehood by haste and uncertainty, and that was by a Roman historian called Tacitus. So that's a quote, okay? The truth is confirmed by inspection and delay, okay? If we will look at this and dive deep and delay and evaluate what we're seeing, okay, that will give us truth. Falsehood in life is when we just go through it really quickly and creates an uncertainty. So we just go through, we don't really care. Checking the box. Check the box. You know, we got to make sure on a housing form, you check the box. Mm-hmm. But it leaves uncertainty there.
Yeah. If you rush through a process, you're going to miss a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so looking at, you know, expect what you inspect. Okay. So we're not always good at doing deep inspection in life. We're not always doing it in business, and we're damn sure not always doing it well in who we have around us. Mm-hmm. The people, you know, in our organization and our life. Do we do an inspection on them? Or do we just kind of go right through it? Well, I wanted to share that, you know, I'm a historian. So I love history, and I love reading history. I love reading leadership. I love entrepreneurial minds. But I think about George Washington. Okay, George Washington, who's obviously the greatest American, you know, in our history. I mean, he's the father of our country. Okay, who was an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. Okay, so he's a business guy, entrepreneur, leader, president, general, all those kind of things. So he encompasses all those areas. Okay, George Washington arguably could have experienced his greatest challenge back during the Revolutionary War. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, if he was alive today, he might say, no, my greatest challenge was having to deal with all these politicians later in my life. Mm-hmm. You know, he might say that.
Yeah, sure.
But from a historical standpoint, we often look at his leadership on the battlefield and saying, okay, here's a guy who went up against the greatest army of all time at that time in the British Redcoats.
Mm-hmm.
And here he's trying to lead a ragtag group of guys to take on, the British and lead them through very, difficult resources, not having that. I mean, just a really tough time. And here he's in the worst winter of 1778 at Valley Forge. And so I kind of look at it, that might have been his greatest issue because of his life, because he's in terrible environment, no resources. Mm-hmm. He's got a hodgepodge of different guys, and he's struggling. Okay, what am I going to do with this floundering army when we're trying to fight for an independence, which would ultimately become the United States?
Mm-hmm.
So man's got a lot of pressure, Matt.
Yeah, a little bit going on.
Yeah.
Blood pressure's a little elevated there.
Yeah, a lot of pressure. And so he's doing this evaluation, and he's looking at, okay, I'm inspecting where I'm at that time. Mm-hmm. And what's he doing? I wrote down some notes here. He said, okay, I've got no discipline, no organizational structure. So he's got an undisciplined rank here. My organizational structure sucks. Mm-hmm. Okay. And he said he's dealing with morale. I mean, when you got people dying out there in the freezing cold, all kind of diseases. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're starving. Morale's bound to be low, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
And so, he's got surrounded with him farmers, tradesmen, merchants, and because these people they didn't spend their life as soldiers. Mm-hmm. They spent their life doing their trade. So he's got all of that, and he has a lack of discipline because these people, they're not truly military career guys. Mm-hmm. They're guys who just volunteered to join an organization and go fight a highly trained military. Mm-hmm. Odds were against him. His inspection was that. So what should have been his expectation? If I got all these things, what should he expect?
I mean, he had his back against the wall. If he had it the other way around, you want to be set up for success.
Man, I think most people after that inspection would have said it's time to throw in the towel. Mm-hmm. I think that's how most people would have operated.
Yeah.
But I can't think, I mean, outside of Jesus, I think, George Washington, you titled the uncommon mentality, the uncommon thought, the uncommon leader. I think George Washington represents uncommon all day long.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, and you see that from the beginning of his life all the way through. And most leaders that I've studied, the Abe Lincolns, the Grants, the George Pattons, you'll see people in a very similar life where if you look at their life, they really shouldn't have ended where they did. They shouldn't have become what they did because there's so many things that should have gone a different way, but they didn't. And so yeah, he represents, the epitome to me of uncommonness, and a willingness and a determination against all the odds of uncommonness. Because I mean, George Washington could have come back to Mount Vernon's business.
Yeah.
I mean, he'd built a business, tobacco and farming. He could have gone back to his business and say, to hell with this, I'm done. Mm-hmm. I mean, guys, appreciate you volunteering. We tried a good run, but it's damn cold out here.
Yeah.
Let's take it to the house.
I've got better things to do.
Yeah, let's take it to the house. This ain't working out. I understand we got to pay a little more taxes, but maybe that colonial rule deal wasn't so bad. But that's not where he went. Mm-hmm. He took all the elements and all the issues, and he said, I'm not throwing in the towel, but I need help. And every great leader is not self-made. We talk about business and leadership today. We'll bring up names like Warren Buffett, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, but if you look at Warren Buffett, the first thing it says, that if I didn't have Charlie, by my side, Charlie Munger, that if I didn't have him, I wouldn't be who I am.
Yeah. Made by those who surround him as well.
And every great leader, if they're truly a great leader, will say that they're not. They don't do it alone. They got to have people with them. And George was the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and what did George Washington do? Well, he reached out to Benjamin Franklin, and he said, "Look, here's my issues." I mean, and I think he probably reached out to more people, but I know Benjamin Franklin was the key person who kind of helped him out of this. And he said, "I need help in this area. It doesn't matter what the strategy I have. It doesn't matter how high I sit on my horse. Okay. And it doesn't matter how much I believe that we can be successful. I need someone who has more skills in an area that I'm not skilled in." And Benjamin Franklin said, "I got your guy."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "I got your guy," because he needed someone who could enact discipline, who could evaluate where we're at, who could see, those needs, but not just see them, could implement things to help them. And who did he find? He found General Frederick Wilhelm von Steuben.
Mm-hmm.
This Prussian general, this guy who basically has been in the military since he was 17 years old. He would go on a fight in the 7 Years' War. He'd work in all kind of areas within the military of whether, it's commissary, supply, obviously training to being an aide to Frederick the Great. He's been everywhere, experienced everything. And at this time, there is a soldier who quoted this, but he was known as the fabled god of war himself.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a pretty strong statement of who you are. The fabled god of war itself.
I mean, you're compared to Mars and Ares and some pretty big names up there.
They got you on a pretty high pedestal there.
Yeah.
This guy is the guru of war.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're George Washington, I got these issues. I want the guru.
Mm-hmm.
I want that guy. And so he did. They got, Frederick to come be with them at Valley Forge. And what Washington made him was the Army's general inspector. So he made him this guy. He said, "Hey, man, I need you to evaluate who we are." Because a general inspector, not everybody knows what that does. I mean, the Army has them. Obviously, the United States, we have an inspector general.
Mm-hmm.
But most people, if I had to ask them, I said, "Hey, what does an inspector general do?" I did that with you and the team, right?
Yeah. I think we came up with some bulletproof answers like inspect.
Inspect, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously they inspect. Yes, they do. They actually, their job is to evaluate, whether it's the Army, to evaluate all kind of areas of the Army, compliance, these kind of things. How are we doing? Mm-hmm. But they're not just people that inspect. They have some pretty good powers. Mm-hmm. The United States Inspector General reports to Congress. They can arrest you. They can.
Oh yeah, it's part of checks and balances. You have to have somebody that can inspect.
It is. Mm-hmm. It is. So they're a very critical role, and Washington made him the first Army's Inspector General. And in 1778, he wrote the regulation for the order and discipline of the troops of the United States. Okay. The regulation for the order and discipline of the troops of the United States. He started creating standards, okay? In his inspection, he said, we have either low standards or no standards. I've got to establish standards. And those standards that he created still live today within our armed forces. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they've evolved just through time, but for 245 years, the idea of good order and discipline and the value of inspections has been the mainstay of not just our military, but of every great one. 245 years. His standards kind of set the tone for a lot of standards in other countries, but have been, the mainstay, the foundational point, standards. You inspect and you see the level of your standards. I made a point, in this thought, that no leader of any good standing ever questions the need for inspections. Okay, and that's a quote that I've heard, that no leader, of any good standing hasn't ever questioned the need for inspections. None of us like to be inspected. Mm-mm. I made a point with you and the team that said, hey, for those of us who get physicals every year, that's an inspection. That is something we sign up and say, you know what, it's good for us to do an evaluation of our overall health, right? That's a good thing.
Sure. Yeah.
But I also made a point, nobody likes to go and say, man, God, I can't wait for that physical I got next week.
Yeah, no kidding. Can't wait to step
Everyone
on that
I ever
scale.
know is like, damn it, I got a physical next week. Better cut the booze off this week. Maybe if I just do it the weekend. You know?
Yeah, get a few days good running into it.
Yeah, every one of us that way. Why? Because we go in there with a perception that we're going to be worse than we were the year before. We get a fear perspective, and we don't like it. It's that first step in it. I mean, the first thing that you're ever going to do when you get your physical is walk in and get weighed. Who likes doing that? I don't like doing it when I go in there and I'm sick. I'm like, I didn't come here to get that.
Yeah, come on, at least let me take my shoes off.
I take my coat off, put my keys over there, lay my phone down.
Yeah.
I don't need anything working against me.
Yep, I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, and so nobody likes that. You go get your weight inspected, and then what's the next thing? They're putting a cuff on your arm and doing blood pressure. That's always a great.
Those two are interrelated there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, of course, my blood pressure's up. It's just on the scale.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's what they do. But the doctor goes through, does blood analysis, work, stuff like that. And the whole idea is to give you an evaluation aspect of where you're at. Because if you don't know where you are, if you don't have a baseline inspection, how can you ever improve? Now, improving a choice, but you need to evaluate and inspect, right?
Yeah. You have to know where your starting ground is to ever get better.
That's the level of what a doctor's trying to do an inspection. But here's the thing. In life, in our organizations, and team, we should be taking that same mentality. Inspect, evaluate, look at where you're at, assess. But we're not always committed to that. So, Matt, I'm an owner and CEO of an organization, and I can tell you within our organization, I love the value of having audits and analysis. And why? Because whenever you have a financial audit, it gives you an evaluation of what you're doing, how you're doing on a financial standpoint. And a good leader, CEO values financial audits. Now we didn't always do a financial audit. And because we didn't always do a financial audit, we'd often do a financial review, which wasn't a deep deal. I went, you've been with me. We rode through some pretty tough times of some issues that happened with our organization.
Sure.
That if I had been doing financial audit, would given a great chance to put in some checks and balances and catch some bad players. So because I wasn't doing it, and because I was recommended by some previous people to not do it, but because I wasn't doing it, I didn't see it.
The things can't rise to the surface if you're not inspecting.
And so to this day, even though there's a cost to it, what I learned to that process is there's a cost to an audit, but there's a greater cost to not doing it. So it's the old statement, you're going to pay now or pay later.
Sure.
But you're definitely going to pay. And so, I can get everybody on board on the financial audit, but what I'm working with our organization and team is, okay, that same rigor that we apply to financial audit, do we truly apply that to every level of an organization? And the truth is, quite often we don't. It's no different having, audits through in your life, your personal finance.
Your physical's an
physical.
audit. Yeah.
But do we take that rigor to every part of it? It's like I can get it. It's like if you have bad habits, you smoke, you drink too much, you eat bad, okay? You're going to get an evaluation if you go through a physical, and the doctor's going to try to correct you on all of them, okay? But if you're a smoker, but you decide I'm going to exercise, but you don't quit smoking, you start eating bad, I mean, I don't even work out well, is it?
Yeah. I mean, you're only inflating one tire on the car.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of us want to go through life saying, hey, we have little to no vices. But I said, if you're going to have a vice, be careful the one you choose.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and if you got them all, That ain't good.
We're not perfect people.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
you can't, you can't carry all the vices. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a recipe for a quick end to it all. So, so you have to evaluate that. But looking at, I think often inspections of, and I'm going to stick to business on this. People don't like inspections or evaluation because it automatically, our mind goes negative on them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, Andrew's coming to the plant. I've heard this many times. If I pull up there, it's like the radios are going like, he's here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
he's here. It's like, it's all points bulletin.
Mm-hmm.
He's showing up and everybody's scrambling. I mean, that's not what I want. I want people to embrace the opportunity of inspections and to embrace that, hey, I'm not here to just walk around and tell you what you're doing wrong. I'm out here to learn, to help, to engage. Sometimes it's to be able to say, okay, no, we're going to go a different direction. But it's like the doctor. He's not there to tell you, man, I'm sorry, man, you're worthless.
Sure.
This thing don't work. No, he's there to help you.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's there to help you in that challenge. And I'm the same way. And so, we know that because often people get a negative morale to it, I think there's an opportunity to really make it positive. And they're not just about, ensuring that we're complying. Inspections, are all about are we disciplined in these areas? What are we doing in it? So they're not all about just, checking a box of compliance. I think, and I wrote this down, when discipline is applied, the people know where they're at in an organization. Meaning that when we evaluate, okay, just like at the doctor or just like in school, we're different, you let people know where they're at. And I think, because I know I'm this way, I'd rather know where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of our biggest failures in leadership, and I put leadership not as people get a title, they automatically put themselves in leadership. But a title doesn't make you a leader. And so if you're not evaluating your team, if you're not evaluating your people, if you're not listening and giving feedback, your level of being able to influence and help people is low.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as leaders, our number one job is to inspect our people. Because if we want to get better, we have to assess, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, it is, I know, and I wrote this down, I shared this before, balance between too much oversight and scrutiny, okay? It's not about, hey, we're here every day I'm not walking in, how many times do I walk in your office and just, that I'm sitting there evaluating, giving you a bunch of oversight and scrutiny? Very rare, right?
Very rare.
Yeah. And I don't think Marty does that overly to you, right?
No, I think if you have great people, trust them to do their job, but make sure you're still evaluating and engaging.
But what happens here? So we know that, that too much oversight, too much scrutiny. What happens though when you left people totally unattended?
Yeah, if you leave people totally unattended, there's a few things we were earlier joking about. When the cat's away, the mice will play. That sort of mentality. But people take their eye off the ball if there isn't some sort of regular interaction that translates to accountability at the end of the day.
I always like to equate it to a good parent, okay? A good parent is, when your child's really, really young, you're kind of really over them a lot, because, a baby, a young toddler, they can get anything any second, right? It's you turn your back on them, they're in something. And so what I like to say is, as obviously as our children get older, a good parent understands the importance of giving them more leash, more room to maneuver. With it, my children, Drew and Claire, 12 and 13, they can jump, on their scooters and they go across the neighborhood and they can go but they do need to check in, They do need to adhere to being back on these particular times. They still have to have some rules of engagement.
Sure.
That when they were younger, I mean, if Drew and Claire were 5 and 6, I wasn't going to let them jump on bikes and scooters and take off, down the road. I mean, no, you wouldn't have done that. That wouldn't have been a good parent.
Mm-hmm.
But we start building that level of trust, but also evaluating them, how are they handling it.
Mm-hmm.
My kids have the iWatch, and you can call and do anything in the iWatch. So there's this ongoing debate on cell phones in the house, and I'm not ready to go there. Their mother would probably go there, but I'm not ready, and that's probably more me. That I feel like that, when we were coming along, we didn't have cell phones at their age. I mean, I remember first cell phone I ever saw was like a bag phone.
Yeah, for sure.
And by the time we got cell phones, I mean, I had a cell phone in high school, or late in high school, but it was a big old flip device. Motorola. I remember the Motorola. And I remember taking it to college.
Nokia brick back then.
Yeah, it was a big one. Had a big old battery, and so, but you know what those cell phones didn't have access to?
I mean, the internet didn't particularly have text messaging back then. I guess you had some.
Didn't have any text messaging back then. I remember when text messaging came, because remember text message was a pain in the butt, because your first cell phones, were the smaller ones you could do text messaging on, but you remember you had the ABC like on number 2, and it was like, it was like a pain in the butt to do text messaging. The ones who saw that was when BlackBerry came out.
Oh yeah,
where you had a true keyboard.
Yeah.
So BlackBerry was the first to kind of really email and text messaging. But so you didn't really. I mean, the phone back then was a phone. The technology, and you've heard the statement before, there's more technology in your phone today than there was on the Apollo 13.
Yeah. I mean, the supercomputer of the 90s probably doesn't match up to a device you can put in your pocket now.
We have laptops and everything, but the truth is we can run most things on our phone.
Mm-hmm.
I do as much work on my phone as I do on my laptop. More, probably.
Yep.
And so the phones today, so many great things, but like anything great, it creates opportunity for not great. It creates opportunity for access to things you want to kind of protect your kids from at this age. They're going to reach an age where you can't protect your kids from, because there's a lot of good out there, but there's a lot of bad. And the unfortunate part about bad is a lot of bad is forced into the system. So you can stumble on bad and not even try and stumble on bad.
Yeah. Bad tends to find you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I know at their age, I wouldn't have been good at it.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to the balance and oversight and scrutiny, that we understand that when we leave things unintended and when we don't inspect and it creates a sloppy, undisciplined, culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this because I know this. If I'm not inspecting me, and if I'm not, my basic nature, because it's human nature, is to kind of be a little sloppy. I mean, it's easy to be lazy.
Sure.
And so we can quickly shift over there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understand it's important to evaluate and inspect, and good leaders understand that. I think that in my analysis and understanding, and where I come back to, because what I want to do a better job, my word this year is discipline. Not just for myself, not just for my health, not just for my life, not just for, it's like I want to make sure that I'm doing that better as an organization, that I'm intentionally taking action, that I'm engaging at all levels within the organization. And so, because I want our people to understand that their work, meaning that what they do every day, will be judged.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I'm judged. I mean, our performance and who I got to answer to, I'm judged on. Everyone should be judged. Reviewed. Okay? It's not just sitting here judging and analysis, it's reviewing. I mean, they're taking time to review, and going back to the inspect and graded deal. My kids are in the last quarter. Your kids are in the last quarter of school. Okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's the same thing. I mean, performance is judged, right?
Yeah.
Performance is reviewed. A good teacher is inspecting work, right?
Yeah. There's a series of, whether it be tests or evaluations or essays or standardized.
I think my kids are in that testing phase right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's graded. if I'm being graded on this deal and I come in with a C, I've got a choice to say, do I want to maintain that C? Because my only options are to go above it or below it.
Yeah.
And so performance should be measured. And so I think while our human nature and people's human nature is to complain about the idea of being inspected and evaluated performance, I think I know I do. When I go through it, I appreciate having the information. I appreciate knowing where I'm at. When I walk out from that doctor, I might not have liked everything he told me, but I appreciate it because at least I know it now.
Yeah.
And if I don't know it, I can't fix it. If I don't know it, I have a choice, but it's hard to have a choice when you don't know anything.
So, Andrew, we've talked about the inspecting, giving you a what to expect. We like to call it fourth and goal on the podcast. What's the main takeaway for our listeners today?
I want to, just wrap up this idea of inspection. This idea of, as individuals, as an organization, if we would truly do the deep dive, if we would truly take the steps to inspect, and go deep, we can raise the bar of our expectations. But if we don't do it, then our expectations should always be low. And so I'm committed to being a better inspector, because when I have that information, I have the ability to help more as a leader.
Thanks for joining us today on the Uncommon CEO podcast. Subscribe to our show wherever you get podcasts. We have video episodes on our YouTube channel and more uncommon wisdom on our social media. Find all our links and resources at uncommonceopodcast.com. For Andrew Smart and all of us here at the Uncommon CEO, stay uncommon.